let's talk about transmembrane ion channels. So, an important question to ask is, why do we need channels? As I'm sure you know, the cell is the smallest functional unit of the body. The many different cells in the body have unique roles that they carry out depending on the body's need or in response to stimuli. The body needs a way to communicate when a cell should be acting and what it should be doing. One of the various ways that the body accomplishes this is through ions. Now, before we talk about those, let's review for a moment. You may recall that human cells don't have a cell wall like plants do, but they do have a cell membrane which keeps all of the cytoplasm and organelles contained in the cellular unit. The cell membrane is made up of, among a few other things, a whole bunch of a specific molecule. This molecule is pretty special and it has two parts of interest. First, it has a phosphate head or tip that is polar, just like water. Now, this comparison is significant because when it comes to polarity, as we know from chemistry, like dissolves like. We use water as a reference because it is the universal solvent. Because the phosphate head has this property in common with water, it's polar, we would refer to it as being hydrophilic, or water-loving. The second portion of this molecule is made up of two fatty acid chains which are nonpolar, or in other words, lipophilic, or, of course, hydrophobic. These molecules arrange themselves all around a cell in two layers. Now, we call these cells phospholipids. We get phospho, obviously from the phosphate head, and lipid from the fatty acid chains, and the cell membrane is referred to as being composed of a phospholipid bilayer, obviously because of the two layers. Now, because of the cell membrane's composition and the properties of the phospholipid bilayer, we observe something interesting. Because of the lipid portion of the membrane, charged particles have a really hard time passing through. Conversely, we see that, in general, uncharged, neutral, lipid-loving particles pass through with little trouble. Of course, since we already said that ions are an important tool that the body uses to launch cells into action, this poses a problem, and that's why we need channels. Now, there are a few ions of interest that we will talk about in a lot of detail in upcoming videos: sodium, potassium, chloride, and calcium. To get these ions into cells so that they can help cells do their jobs, the body employs transmembrane ion channels, or channels that span the membrane or go across the phospholipid bilayer to allow for ions to pass through. Transmembrane ion channels take two forms: voltage-gated ion channels and ligand-gated ion channels. Because both of these channels overlap in which ions they conduct or allow to pass through, there is an important naming paradigm to keep in mind. Voltage-gated ion channels are named or classified by the ions that they conduct. So we have channels like voltage-gated sodium channels, calcium channels, and potassium channels. If the name of an ion is used in the name of the channel, generally we know we are talking about a voltage-gated channel. Ligand-gated ion channels are named or classified by the endogenous activating ligand. All this means is that there is a different type of molecule, called a neurotransmitter, that the body releases that interacts with the receptor and allows for these types of channels to open and allow the ions to pass through them. But remember, these are ion channels, so it is the ions that pass through the channel, not the neurotransmitter. Examples of these are acetylcholine receptors that conduct sodium, GABA receptors that conduct chloride, and NMDA or glutamate receptors that conduct calcium. In the upcoming videos, we will look at the general mechanics of voltage-gated ion channels. Then we will spend some time looking at the specifics for each individual voltage-gated receptor, such as sodium, calcium, and potassium. Similarly, for the ligand-gated ion channels, we will look at the general mechanics before diving into some of the specifics of acetylcholine, GABA, and NMDA receptors. I hope that you're ready to dive into the very cool world of how receptors work. As we go through them, just take a moment to appreciate that the mechanics we will be talking about are taking place all over your body pretty much all the time. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.